All right, I'm going to start up what we're going to do today, ideally between now and 11:55, is create what you see on the screen. This is called a Bootstrap landing page. I've given you some of the beginning files that you need. What we're going to have to do is very much add to the index.html that I've given you, and also the CSS file, the style.css. Right now there's just a comment on the top of it that says to be created in class. That's all that's there. All right, so right now you don't have to do this, but if you brought yours up, it would be empty because there's nothing in there. Okay, does that make sense? One of the things that I wanted to show you in here, and we're going to kind of do this in order, through my travels online, I found some decent sites, and when I find some stuff, you know, I think you may or may not be interested in taking a look at it, but this first one is kind of neat. It's called css3generator.com. So let's suppose that Amin here wants to do a box shadow. He wants to create a shadow around something, but he can't remember how to do it. All right, and he could go and look online for an example. He could probably go through his book and look for an example, or he could come out here to like css3generator.com, you know, and it says choose something and box shadow. So he'd choose that, and he'd say, well, let's see, I want this horizontal length, let's say, to be 0, the vertical to be 0, the blur to maybe be 10 pixels, the spread to be 0, and the color type, oh, we'll just use a hex, and we'll just say, you know, we'll use something over here. All right, and I'm just making that up. It doesn't mean anything. But the point is, what that does is it generates the code that he needs to be able to do that, which is kind of nice. So it's called CSS3 generator. So the idea behind it is that the stuff that's in here are the newer CSS3 things. All right, so it's something you might want to take a look at if you get a chance. Another one that I found in here is a thing called colorzilla.com. So when you're working with colors and you want to be a little bit more intricate, it's another one that you may want to take a look at. All right? Okay. Now, what I want to show you is this. This may not mean much to you, but to me, one of the important things that for me to do is to kind of keep you up with the latest and greatest. Okay? If I'd have taught this class a year ago, I would have said, well, the newest thing that's available in Bootstrap is Bootstrap version 3. In fact, for the examples we've used thus far, we've used Bootstrap 3.3.7, I think it is, because that's the newest version 3 that there is out there. One thing about Bootstrap, if you don't know, Bootstrap used to be called Twitter Bootstrap. The reason I'm telling you that, the reason that's kind of important, is there is actually two gentlemen from Twitter who created Bootstrap. And they created it internally for something that would be used in Twitter. But it became so popular that they were encouraged to make it open source. You may or may not know what open source means. But when something is open source, what happens is people take the code and they put it out there for free for anybody to be able to use. All right, now some people, you know, when I've said this before, raise their hand and go, why the heck would you do that? You're losing money. Well, the idea is, in IT, is we're all better if we have something available to us that we can look at and then maybe suggest changes. My first programming job was working for AT&T Bell Laboratories, okay? We used an operating system there that's called Unix. And what happened was Unix, it's very, in some ways, very archaic to the stuff we do because you write commands to do everything, all right? Well, while I was there were at least one or two people who said, you know, I've taken these commands and I've combined a bunch of them, and now they can do this, and now you can do this, and now you can do that. And other people looked at it, that's really cool. So what they did was they took those commands that they created, this series of commands, and they actually did the equivalent of emailed it right in to the people who run Unix. And if they liked it, what they did was they added it to the Unix command set, and on the page where they had, you know, the information about it, you know, so they had some kind of a documentation page, it would say, for example, developed by Jeff Scott. So that was kind of the turn on for developers, the reason for doing that. But what you're finding as time goes on is more and more software is becoming open source. Things that are being made available for anybody to use and anybody hopefully to be able to improve upon. All right? And what I want to mention about that is if you take a look, you may or may not be able to see this where the mouse is, but it says currently v4.0.0 alpha 4. What that means is this is Bootstrap 4, which is going to replace eventually Bootstrap 3. Okay? And one thing historically about Bootstrap, when Bootstrap went from Bootstrap 2 to Bootstrap 3, when they went, there were versions, minor versions in between, but when they went from version 2 to version 3, historically one of the things about Bootstrap is they don't do a good job as far as if I created something in Bootstrap 2 and I brought it up in Bootstrap 3, it would look terrible. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes when you work with software and you go from one version to another, next semester we'll work with Visual Studio. If you create something in Visual Studio 12 and you bring, 2012 and you bring it up in 2015, it's going to look exactly the same. All right? But some of the stuff is changed here in version 4. So I wanted to mention that to you. Okay? One of the things that's changed is people thought for years that Bootstrap was really cool because when you downloaded Bootstrap, if you remember this, one of the things that you got were all these glyphicons or glyph icons. So you got a folder with all these glyphicons. All right? And there were probably maybe a few hundred of them. The problem is the way that they were set up, the way that these glyphicons were set up, is it was real hard for you to change their size and their color, etc. So what they decided to do in Bootstrap 4 was to get rid of these glyphicons. He was like, well, okay, you got rid of them, but then what are you going to do? Well, then the idea was that you would come out and you would load your own. So you'd go up, for example, to Font Awesome. And if I go to Font Awesome and I go to icons, there's very many of the same ones. In fact, virtually all the same ones that you had in Bootstrap. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is if you remember on one of your previous tests, you were supposed to put in a check mark. All right. Oh, it says enter a valid email. That's because I don't want to put an email address. I want to search. All right. So now I click check mark and come on. Well, what's supposed to happen here? When you search is it'll give you a list of the different things that are in there that have check marks, and I know there are some. All right. So what I'm trying to get across to you is here in Bootstrap 4, you no longer get glyphicons added for you. You have to bring them in. All right. All right. So the way that you do that is at this site here. Okay. So you go the Font Awesome and you click download. And it says, wow, this has got a whole bunch of stuff here. Do you want all this? We really don't. So we would just click, no thanks, just download Font Awesome. All right. So it downloads it into a zip file right here. And if I look at it, if I go over and show it in my folder here, all right, it gives me this. And I'm going to unzip it just so you can see what it looks like. So there's CSS, there's fonts, there's a bunch of other stuff in here. The only real file that we need in here is under CSS, and it's the one called, you can use either the minified one or the other one, but let's open up the other one. This is fontawesome.css. And if you notice, it's about 2,200 lines long. So what it has in there is CSS for each one of those icons that are in there. So you don't have to do that kind of stuff. All right? All right, that's one thing that I wanted to quickly show you. The other is, you may or may not, again, be aware of this, but for example, if I come out and I bring up a document, let's just say I'll bring up our syllabus here. Okay? And I look in here and I click here. I notice that this is a font that's called Interstate Regular. And if I look here, if I click the download button, that's got all the fonts that are available to me. that make sense to everybody? Okay. But there are a lot more fonts that are out there than that. The good news is, if you pick a standard font like a Times New Roman or an Arial, people should be able to look at that, whether they're using, I don't know, whether they've got a Mac or whether they're using some kind of a Unix or Linux machine or this type of machine. They should be able to do that. But sometimes part of the problem is people look through this and you know what? There's really not any kind of font in there that I want. All right? I mean, there's a lot of fonts there, but there's not one that I want. So if you don't know about this already, what you can do is you can go out to Google has created what are called Google Fonts, which as you can see are under https://fonts.google.com. So if I go out there, and let's say, because the one that we're going to use here, let's see, I'm going to come in here and somewhere, again, there's a search box. There we go. And I'm going to type in just another. All right. So if you look right here, this is another font that we can use. And it's literally called Just Another Hand. Now you say, well, why do they call that? I didn't make up the name, so I don't know why. But the point is, if I want to be able to use this particular font, and we'll do this, if I want to be able to use this now in a document or in a web page or whatever, I click the plus button down here. All right, and it says family selected. Then I click down here, and it shows me what I have to do then. I have to literally bring in and link in that style sheet. Again, I realize it's kind of hard to see, I'm sorry. But I have to link in that style sheet, and then I have to set the font family. So it's not hard to add customized fonts. And the good news is, if you put that into your web page, anybody can use that, whether they have that font installed or not. It'll bring it in when you bring up the system. Does that make sense? Because again, we've talked a little bit about things like UX, user experience, and a few other things. One of the things that's distinguishing one website from another today is, among other things, is their use of color and their use of fonts. And sometimes people just want to use a certain font. Why? Because it's cool. All right? And if I wanted that to be bold too, there's ways that I can do that. So I can click the embed, customize, I'm sorry. And notice, well, there's just regular here, but we'll look at one later that's got an option there for bolding. Okay? So you'll take a look at all those as we go on. So I just wanted to show you at least what that stuff was. All right? So right now, what you have on your screen, we've got this, just so you see it. This is the first file. So if you go into the folder that I gave you, and under that folder, you bring up, you click on there's a folder in there that's called HW1. All right, that's the first homework. That's this one. Can everybody find that folder? All right, in that folder, there should be an index.html file, and there should be a folder in there called CSS, and under the CSS, there should be a folder, and that folder should be called style.css. Okay? Now, did everybody have a chance? I gave you that, I gave you the, this morning, the flash drive. Does anybody still have the flash drive? Is anybody who didn't get a chance to? Okay. Can you walk it over to Drew there, please? Because I want to make sure we're all at the same place. And for tomorrow, I'll have to make sure that Ethan and Brady both get it too. Because by the end of the period, we're going to have this done. So it's going to be their responsibility, ideally at least, to watch this video that I'm creating. All right? So right now, if you look at this, it's already about 44 lines long, the index.html file. When we get done, it's going to be about 104 lines. So we're around halfway done with it already. All right? But we're going to build this incrementally so you can see, bless you, so you can see what's happening as we do this. So what I want to do is first explain everything that's on here right now. Now, it may not totally make sense, so you might have to go back and either rewatch this or take a look at the stuff yourselves. I'm going to take for granted that right now everybody understands what that first line up there means, that doc type. It means that we're, since it says just doc type HTML, it means that we're using an HTML5 compliant document. That's what we're doing. Okay? That's what that means. There's our HTML tag, and even though it defaults to English, we're saying that the language is English. Okay? I'm taking for granted that that makes sense. All right? Then, and I'm looking in here, boy, shame on me. I see the head tag here, and I see the beginning head tag, but I don't see an ending head tag. So I'm going to look, and if I don't have one, and if you don't have one, we're going to put it in. So there's the head, and that's it. Okay, so that's the only occurrence of it. So please, right up above the body tag, put in your ending head tag. All right, I want to make sure that your first 15 lines look like this. Can everybody read that part okay? And I'll give you a second to do that. And one of the reasons I gave you the stuff that I gave you was, we can talk about this now, but I don't have to have you spend a lot of time typing this stuff in. All right? And then saying, geez, why doesn't this work? I don't understand it. Because you mistyped something, or you forgot a double quote, or whatever. All right? So, taking this from the top, again, this is our head section. Remember, everything that's in the head section does not appear on the web page itself. All right? So the first thing we have are our meta tags. This says that the character set that we're using is UTF-8. Again, what that means in English is we're using Unicode. If you want to know more about Unicode, just Google it. All right? The next line. This is the stuff, so we're trying to set it up. We're trying to set it up to be mobile first. We've talked about the viewport tag before. The content equal width equal device width means use the entire width of whatever I'm using, whether it's a phone or whether it's a desktop or a laptop or whatever. The initial scale, bring it up at 100%. The shrink to fit equal no means don't allow it to shrink. All right. The next thing that's in here, because Microsoft isn't happy unless you've got to do something special for them, and that's what this is. What this is trying to do is any problems that you could potentially have with Microsoft Edge, which is their newest version of their browser, this is trying to fix. All right? So, then we look here. And you notice these first two lines here. All right? First, we've got rel equals style sheet, href equals css / bootstrap.min.css. Since we are saving our index.html file, and since it's saved not to any folder, what we're telling it here is go to the CSS folder and find a file in there called bootstrap.min.css and include that. So make the stuff that's in there available, okay, to the project. Does that make sense? Now, you should never, ever have to go into this file and change anything. If you wanted to change something that was in that file, you would do it in this file because that's yours. Okay, because I've seen this before where people say, well, I'm just going to tweak that file a little bit. And they do, and they screw it up. All right, it's a natural type of thing to do. This is what I mentioned to you before. This brought in that font awesome. I already showed that file to you. All right. These two files right here, they allow us to use those the special fonts, okay, from Google Fonts that we're going to use. All right? And then this is our own style sheet. Now, does what I just said, is there anything in there that doesn't make sense? The recommendation is always that you put your own style sheets at the bottom because they may overwrite anything in the style sheets up above them. So you put your stuff last. Now, we've talked about this already. Rel equals style sheet means that's the relation. It's a style sheet. Href means go to the CSS folder, and there's a file under there called style.css. Sometimes you'll see type equals text /CSS. which is called the MIME type. It's multi-purpose internet media extension or something like that. You used to have to put that in, but now the system is smart enough that it says, oh, the extension on the end is .css, so it basically adds that for you. The reason I'm telling you that is you'll still see it out there, especially on more legacy applications, older applications. All right. The other thing, again, that you might see is this: media equals screen. All right. And remember that media equals screen means just for the screen here. That's what this style sheet's for. So in other words, I could also have, don't put this in, but if I wanted to, I could also have maybe print style, and that media would say print. All right. Now, I'm trying to be honest here. Does everybody understand everything up to this point? Because it's important that you do understand that. Because what we're going to do for the rest of the period is we're going to bounce back and forth between the index.html file and the CSS file. So we're going to add something to one, and then we're going to bring it up in the browser, and you're going to go, that looks really bad. Then we're going to go into the CSS and fix it. Then we're going to go back to the browser again. And we're just going to do this. This is what we're going to do for the rest of the period. All right. What I'll try to do is come 9 o'clock, so on the hour, I'll give you 10 minutes. All right. Because I know this is a little, it's not that seems so much that it's boring, but it's, after a while it's a little repetitive, etc., and it gets to be kind of a pain. All right. So I'm going to remove all this stuff that I added here. All right. So again, everybody said they understood this. Okay. All right. So what we're doing, what we want to end up doing when we're done, I'm going to ask you a question. You don't even have to answer it out loud, but it's kind of important that you look at this. And if I said to you, how many different components, how many different parts are there on this page? You don't have to answer, but I want you to count right now and see if you can figure out how many different things are on this page. And I don't mean, oh, there's a horse and there's a guy. I don't mean that. I mean, how many different things are on this page? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, then I'm going to ask for a show of hands. And then I'll tell you how many I think are on the page. All right, how many people think there's between 1 and 5 things on the page? 6, 7, 8. Okay, we got 1, 2 for 8. 9, 10. More than 10? Okay. Well, I agree with those people who said 10. And let me tell you how I count them. Okay. 1 is the background. That's our image. That's number 1. Number 2, that's our logo. So there's an image and a logo. That's 2 things. Then we've got some text here. That's 3. We got some more text down here. You can notice that text is changing. So that's 4. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different icons. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got a text box here. That's 9. And we got a button here. That's 10. That's what I count. So again, you may have counted a little more or a little less. But the reason that I'm telling you that is what that means is potentially there's 10 different things on here that we'll want to be able to work with CSS. That make sense? All right. So you'll notice that if I come through here and I'm going to grab, let's see, our style.css file. Okay. This is the one that we're going to create. But this is the program that we're working on. I'm going to grab this file and I'm going to comment it out. Now I'm going to run the program again. Okay? And you can see there's still some of the stuff there. You don't see the image. The colors aren't the same, etc. These are actually the default colors right there. And you see some of the stuff. This becomes green when we work on it. These become bouncy, etc. You notice that the text is real simple. All right? So you can already see why we need the style sheet. Or at least, hopefully, you can see why we need the style sheet. All right? So the first thing that we're going to do, and I've got the same one you do right here. So again, if I bring this up right now, it looks like that. That's it. And I don't know about you, but to me, that's not very much. Not very much in there. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come over to our CSS, and we're going to add some stuff. All right. So I want you to open up that style.css file, which currently looks like this. You can keep the comment in. You can remove it. I don't really care. And I'm going to just put in here HTML. And let me see if I can make the font a little bigger. Is that big enough? Everybody can see it okay? Okay back there, Evan? Okay. All right. So I'm going to say, remember, if we want to put a background in, remember it's background. All right. And URL /img/www.jpg. These are the names I gave it. Now that's a real crummy name because that doesn't mean World Wide Web. What I was trying to do was show you a picture of the Wild Wild West, and I probably should have used something other than www, but it just worked out that way. If you don't like it, you can always change it. Okay? All right. Now, just bear with me for a second. I'll come right back to it. Okay? But I want to go and run this now. Come on. And it's not showing me anything. Well, that isn't a good start. Let's see if I change the name. No. See, that's what's supposed to be coming up now, is this. That's the picture. All right. Not sure why it's not, but we're going to see if we can figure it out. Style sheet is CSS. That's good. Background. URL. G/JPEG. Pardon me? No, it is this should be okay. Background image. It's // See that? I didn't have the slash there. You don't have the slash there, you probably got the same thing I did, which was nothing. So now let's run it in Chrome. There. So there's the start. Now, hopefully you got the same thing. If you did not, go back and double check and make sure that you put that line or these 4 lines of CSS in. So what we said was create a background image and center it on the screen. We're going to need to do more to it than that. That should make sense. It looks pretty bad right now. Is there anybody who tried to do this and didn't get anything at all to print out? All right, so the next thing that we want to do is, and you're going to see a big change when we do this, and that is we're going to say height 100%. I'm just going to do that. I'm just saying height 100%. Now I'm going to go back again into my file, and I'm going to run it again. And you notice there's a big difference, right? It looks much closer to what our final product is going to look like. Okay? We're doing this slow. We're doing it slow on purpose. All right? Okay. So the only problem is, if you look at this, would everybody agree looking at the screen, and I'm not trying to be funny here, it's not covering the entire screen. Would you all agree with that? All right. So we're going to tell it that we want it to cover the entire screen. So we're going to come back to here, and we're going to say background size cover. All right. Let me jump back to here. I'll jump right back again, so don't worry about not seeing anything. See the difference? So we've got the first of our 10 components are now in there, or is now in there, and it looks, to me at least, like it's in there correctly. Okay? Let me jump back to here and to here. sometimes the best way to learn this stuff, especially if you're struggling in here, is to put in something into your CSS, then immediately look at it. All right? Any questions on any of that stuff? Because we're done now with the background. We don't care about it anymore. All right? So, we just said that the first thing that we wanted to put in there, all right, our first component that we wanted to put in there was the background. Okay? And that's our completed one. So again, let's go back to here. So we've got that. Okay? Now you don't have to do them in order, but it, to me at least, would be natural if the first component is the background, the second one would be the logo. That make sense? You don't have to do it that way, but really the way most people work, we live in a world that goes from top to bottom and that goes from left to right. All right? My younger sister, when she got married, she converted to Judaism. And because the guy she married was Jewish. And I've gone to both of her kids' bar mitzvahs, and one was like a bas mitzvah or whatever the heck it's called. But it's interesting when you see people, because in Hebrew, they go from right to left when they read. But we're used to doing it this way. Okay? So we've done our first component, so now we're going to do our second. All right? And we didn't have to add anything to our index.html file to make that background work. We didn't. We just put in some CSS. All right? But now what we're going to do is we are going to go and jump into our index.html file. Please look up on the screen here. Notice what our first section is called. Logo. All right? So what we want to do here is we want to put in the code for our logo section. When we first put it in, it won't have any CSS in it. So it won't be centered, and it might not be exactly on the screen where we want it to go. Does that make sense? It's just going to go into a default location for lack of better wordage. All right? Okay, so let's put in the stuff for our logo. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open this up. Remember, we're using Bootstrap. Okay? By default, Bootstrap is greedy. What I mean is it tries to use up all of the area that it can, which makes it very hard if you want to center something. We want to center our logo because if you remember, when we looked at it, our logo is centered on the screen. Okay? We want it to be centered. Since we want it to be centered, the first thing that we're going to put in here is we're going to put in a div and we're going to say class equals container. You have to spell it right. What I'm doing right now, you don't have to do this. You can, but you don't have to. Some people like it that every single time they add something and then they end it, they put a comment there so you can see exactly where it ends. If you're having problems getting stuff to line up, okay, then I'd suggest you do that. If you go, I don't even know what the heck you're talking about, then don't do it. It's fine. Now, we're working with Bootstrap. We've got a section. Our section has a container class in it, all right, which says, again, we're going to want to center something or possibly center it or move it around on the screen. Do you remember? Bootstrap is made of a grid system. Does everybody remember that? And the magic number I told you was 12, all right? Every single thing that you put into Bootstrap, every one of those collections of 12 have to go in what's called a row. So the next thing that we're going to put in here is we're going to put in another div right here. And we're going to say in here, class equal row. All right. So our section contains a container. Our container contains a row. Now, I'm going to strongly recommend, I don't take off for this, and I've been chastised by people that I worked with over the years for it. I'm going to strongly suggest you get into where you start tabbing like this, because I notice many of you are not. You're just throwing everything up on the page. It's the old saying, I'm going to throw it against the wall and see what sticks type of an idea. You really shouldn't do that. You should get used to. Now, you can go in here and you can play with it. So if you say, well, that's too big, I don't like it, it's tabbing over like 4 places, you can go in there and there's something under the settings here. You could set it to 2, for example, if you wanted to do that. All right. Now, we've got a section that's called logo. It's got a container in it, and that container in it has a row. Well, remember, inside of those rows, we have to go and we have to put in there, we have to tell it, we have to separate it into those 12 components. All right, so we come in here now and we say div class equal col dash md dash 12. And then we're going to end that. Oops, that was nice. Okay. So right now, I'm not going to run this, but if I ran it, would everybody agree looking at this? Nothing's going to show on the screen because I haven't put anything in there yet. I've set it up for 12 columns, but there's nothing in it. All right. So now we actually come in and we put in our image. Okay. This is going to look a little different from the way we've done images previously. I'm going to see, on mine I don't have the dot dot, so I don't know if this is going to be interesting to see if this works or not. So I'm going to put here image dash all right. Before you run this, let me run it, make sure it looks okay. It's not showing, there's the image up there. Okay, trying to figure out, okay, so on mine it looks like this. Okay, that's what, believe it or not, that's how it's supposed to look. We're going to fix that in just a second. That's good. All right, so this is what I want you to put in. This line right here. So when you get done, you should now have inside of your section for your logo, all that stuff in gray should be in there. So that gives you a chance, if you've fallen behind or whatever, to fix that. But I'm asking here, because we're looking at bootstrap specifics here. Does everything we've just done make sense? A container, which has a row, which has columns, which has something in the columns. Does that make sense? Let's pretend for a second we wanted 3 logos in there. Let's just say we did. In the same row. We could literally have the div class, we could have put a 4 there, and then put this, put another div with a 4, and put this again, and another div with a 4 and put that again. Does that make sense? Everything, this is a very simple example. Everything's going to be size 12 that we do in here. And this says, again, our columns are going to be a medium size, that's the MD, and each one of them is going to take all 12 cells. Does all that make sense? Pardon? The reason your question was, why are you making columns? And the answer is, this works on a grid system. And everything that you put in there for 12, each one of those is a column. So we're telling it to take up all 12 columns. That's what we're doing. The width is 12 columns, yes. And if you run it now, it looks kind of weird. If you did everything I showed you, it's actually there, you just don't see it. We're going to fix that right now. All right, and it's a very simple fix. We're going to go back then to our CSS, and here we wrote HTML. But we don't want to just apply that to that. If we'd have just put in body to begin with instead of HTML, this would have been fixed from the start. So you can put in HTML, comma, body, or you can just remove the HTML and just put in body. Either one of those will work. But if you look up on the screen here, I'll come right back to it, but if you look on the screen, there it is. It's not centered yet, we've got to fix that. But we now have that in there. So this is right here, this is what we had to do. Just add that body. So again, if I remove this, so it just says this, that would work also. But I did it like that to show you that if we don't put the body tag in there, the system doesn't know to apply that, so it's grabbing that image and it's overlaying it. It's overlaying that image, the logo, right on top of our background image. And since we told it to take up 12, that's why it took up the whole screen, and you couldn't see it. All right, so again, notice if I do it like this instead of, so I remove the word HTML, and now I've got this, and if I refresh, it still looks, oh, it didn't like that. All right, maybe it does want HTML in there. And it does. Okay, so you do need them both. All right. So we've done that. Well, what we have to do now is we have to put in some CSS, because what we want is we want that image to be centered. So we want to move it over there. All right. That should make sense to everyone. Okay. And if we go back in here and we look, you'll notice that we've got an ID named logo. So we could be as whatever as we wanted to be. If we put in our CSS, we could put in hashtag logo followed by dot container followed by dot row followed by dot colMD12, etc. We could do all that stuff. But really what we want to change is that image, and that image is inside of this section. Does that make sense? That's one of the reasons that you use these tags, is it's so that you can segregate stuff off. You can say, hey, everything that's in here belongs to an ID of logo. Everything that's in here belongs to an ID of intro, etc. as we get going. All right? So we're going to come back to our CSS, and we're going to tell it, let me just hit enter a few times here so I move that up a little. All right, so we're going to tell it right here. What we want is we want you to go pound logo, the ID of logo, and our image. And for our image, does anybody remember, I'm asking you this, does anybody remember how we center something on the screen? Not all at once. All right. You say margin, margin, and after margin, okay, you say 0, remember that's top and bottom, auto, that's left and right. Hopefully you remember that. So notice I put in pound logo IMG for our image. All right, so that's any image that's under the ID of logo, and what we're saying is we want to center it. So let's see if that worked. This is what it looked like previously. If I click my button here to refresh, nothing happened. But that is correct. Pound logo, image, margin, 0, auto. There's the image. Oh, I should mention this. See where this says class equal IMG fluid? All right. That's a bootstrap class that tries to make sure as you make things wider or narrower that the image stays fluid, that it all shows. It does the best it can. All right. Still trying to figure out why that wouldn't have worked, but it didn't. Huh. Well, my hope is that as we go on and we do a little bit more, it's going to somehow straighten itself out. Did yours center or not center? Yours didn't either. Okay. All right. The other thing that I want to do is just to show you this, and we didn't have to do this, but I'm going to say here, padding, top, and I'm going to put in about 20 pixels of padding. Okay? All right. Why? Just to show you. See how close this is to the top right here? Everybody see that? Now I'm going to refresh. Can you see how it moved down a little bit? Still not sure why it's not centering, but hopefully that's going to be fixed. And again, it gave you a chance to see what padding is all about. All right? So with all of this stuff, once you get it done, if you want to start really learning this stuff, grab this project, make a copy of it, and go ahead and start jacking with all of this stuff. That's how you're going to learn. Everything's right there except it's not working. All right. So now, even though we still have to fix that thing, we have to get it centered and it's not centered, but we now have our first 1, 2 components in there. So what's next when we start looking? So we've got everything done in here, and I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. So I'm working from notes. Yeah, everything is right. All right. The next thing that we want to do is what's called intro. And if you say, well, what's that? Remember, this is our final product. Intro says we'll be ready to launch in. See that right there? That's the intro text right there. So if we look at this, and I want to cut this down. Well, that's not going to work. Yeah, it will. I'm going to cut this down like this. If we look, all right, we started with logo. No, actually, we started up here. That was our background. Then logo was here. All right, intro is going to be this text right here. Then we're going to go to counter, which is our countdown counter right there. Then we're going to go to icons, which are our 4 icons right here. Then we're going to go to sign up, which is the stuff right here. Does all that make sense? So that's how we're setting it up. Still isn't centering. Ugh. All right, so we want to come in here now. You've got your choice. And I'm saying this is, believe me, this is not a joke, okay? But you've got your choice. What we want to do down in here in our intro is we want to replicate all of this stuff right there. Every bit of it, except instead of the image, we're going to want to put a paragraph tag in that says, we'll be launching in, okay? So I'm going to, instead of retyping, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open up a line here, and I'm going to paste it in. Okay, then I'm going to remove the image tag right there. Has everybody understood what I just did? Again, we wanted to replicate, but instead of, the ID equals this, etc., okay, I wanted to set it up like this. So the only thing then that we have to put in here is a paragraph tag that says we'll be ready to launch in ... So again, please look up on the screen. For other than our section name, what's in here and what's in here are identical, except in here we put in an image, and in here we put in a paragraph. And I think I know why it's not centering. See this? See where it says col equal? That should be a dash. Not col equal MD12, it's col dash MD12. All right, now let's run it to see if it's centered. It still isn't centered. Okay, I'm not happy right now. But notice underneath here, everybody see this? We'll be ready to launch. All right, Still trying to figure out why this isn't centering, but we'll get to it. All right, I'm not going to worry about that right now. So it's kind of hard to see on here, but it's there. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to go into the CSS for our paragraph. Does that make sense? Okay? So we're going to come back here. We're going to open up our styles.css. And underneath what we just did for our logo, now we're going to have a pound intro because that's the name of that section. It has an ID of intro. And our paragraph, well, we want to do a few things here. First thing we would like to do is we'd like to center the text. So we'll say text, align, center. All right, and the color was pretty bad because it was black on a real dark background. So let's make the color white, just so it sticks out a little bit more. We're not done yet, but let's do those. And now let's take a look here and see what it looks like. And it's not showing any of my changes, which is, pardon me? Oh, yeah. That's the wonders of the software. It automatically did, thank you, it automatically did code completion for me, even though I didn't want it to. There, that's better. Now that's not centered, but notice that is. We'll be ready to launch in. So there's something still goofed up with our image. Yes?
The class for the image, you have image equals fluid.
It's image dash fluid. Thank you. There you go. So back up on top, we said for the image, class equals image equal fluid. It should have been image dash fluid. Thank you. Now, there we go. Now it looks like that. All right. Well, hopefully you notice, taking a look at that, and thank you again. Hopefully you notice the text is pretty small. It's easier to see now because it's white, so it's against the darker background. It's easier to see, but it's still a small. So we still have some CSS that we'd like to put on that paragraph. All right, so far we've got text align center, color white. Let's add to this font size 1.8 M's, which means make it almost twice as big as it was. Remember, 1 M is 100%, so 1.8 M's is like make it 180%. Now you don't have to do this, but if you look up on the screen here, notice that when I click, see how much better or bigger it got? All right, but still, that's a very generic vanilla font. I don't like it. But remember, one of the things that we added before was we added our own font. All right, or we actually added two of them. So we're going to say here, font family, just another hand, cursive. Yeah, that doesn't need to be capitalized. Now, you should all know, if you look up on the screen here, all of you should know, we're going to take a break as soon as we finish this part. What this says is, I want to use this font. I want to use this one. If for some reason you can't find it, use a cursive font. Question is, does it matter? You can use single quotes or double quotes there. Either one is fine. All right. You're going to work with some languages where you use single quotes at one time and double at another. This is one where it doesn't matter. All right. You have to use both single and both double. You can't mix them, but whichever one you want to use is fine. So when I go back now, see where it says we'll be ready to launch in? Now on your screen, if you still didn't like that, if it still wasn't big enough for you, you could make it 2 or 3 or whatever. The problem is there's other stuff we're going to be putting here. So as we keep making it bigger, we've got less room for the other stuff we're going to add. Does that make sense? All right, that's the end then of part 1. It's 9:02. Let's come back at 9:15. All right, we're just going to continue it on from there. Is this helping? Does this make more sense? All right. I was thinking about this last night, so this is, I didn't grade your test. This is because I did this all night. All right? All right, so let's take a break right now.